Welcome back. I am really glad that you're here. I didn't realize when I recorded the episode for week 3 that it would be so long, that I would have so much to talk about. And so I ended up, after I recorded it and saw how long it was, I ended up breaking it into 2 episodes. Last week's episode was just about Monday. There's lots of stuff happening on Monday to talk about. And so this week's episode is what happened on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of our 3rd week of summer camp. I hope you enjoy it.
Always at Starfish Social Club, it's been an option for kids to take their shoes off while they're there. It's always been an option. And most of the kids do. This year, the first day of summer camp, it was muddy outside. And so I told everybody that we're taking our shoes off because I didn't want mud everywhere inside. We have carpet. And so that's just been what we do every day. I also don't have a vacuum. And so that's just what we do every day is we take our shoes off. In one of our lessons that we have in the fall, in the year-round program, one of the things we talk about when it comes to being in a group is not picking things in front of other people. And I have the kids tell me everything they can think of that you could possibly pick, right? So we get picking wax out of our ears, picking food out of our teeth, picking our pimples, picking our underwear out of our butt, right? What are all the things that you can think about that we could pick? And whatever they are, we don't want to do those in front of other people. We do those in our bedroom. We do those in our bathroom. I even talk about how if you look when you're in a car, you will see adults driving cars picking their nose, but there aren't other people in their car. So we all pick things. It's always okay to pick things. We just try not to do it in front of other people. What I noticed this particular week is that for kids who come in sandals or slides, when they take their shoes off, they have nothing on their feet. And the amount of toe picking that we have had is making me a little nuts. I have a thing for toes. I'm not a fan of feet. I don't want to see feet. I don't want to touch feet. I don't want people touching my feet. So this is definitely a personal thing. But it goes back to this lesson about picking things in front of other people. So a couple kids this week, we had this kind of conversation repeatedly, mainly because they don't recognize, it's like any other habit that we have. We don't always recognize that we're doing it. So a couple of kids kept picking their toes, picking toenails. One of the kids, I think, had a blister or a callus that he was picking at. But not only do other people find that gross, also, we are playing a lot of games and doing a lot of things. And so when you're picking your toes and then you're rolling the dice for a game, you're then passing that onto things that everybody else is also going to touch. So when we think about our kids getting older and we think about employment, this is actually a big thing with getting and keeping a job. It's part of hygiene. So if you are at a job and you keep picking the wax out of your ears and then going about your job, or you keep picking the pimples on your face and then going about your job, this is part of hygiene. And even if you don't have a job that has anything to do with hygiene, people around you feel uncomfortable about stuff like that. They don't want to touch the things you've been touching. It's the same people who chew their fingernails. It's usually not the chewing of the fingernails that's a problem. It's that they're getting their germs all over their fingers and then they're touching other things. So picking of things is a big hygiene issue. It also just makes other people feel kind of gross. So that was a big thing that we talked about for several days during week 3 because it kept coming up. Previously, I would have kids go wash their hands if they had been chewing their fingernails or whatever. But previously we had a bathroom in our suite and this year we don't. So it's actually a lot more disruptive for me to ask somebody to go wash their hands. Whereas previously it was just right out the door. Another interesting thing that happened on Tuesday is we're going to play a game that 6 people can play. It is called Aggravation. It is the #1 favorite game at Starfish Social Club. But because we have so many new kids right now, we actually haven't played it this year. So I brought it out to play on Tuesday. We were all going to play together. We had a couple of kids who weren't there on Tuesday. We had one kiddo who had to go home early, and so our group kind of got smaller. So it was the perfect game for everybody to play together by the time we got to game time. And 3 people all wanted to be blue. My feedback input for situations like this, I don't solve this problem. This is not my problem to solve. I do give some input. I'll say something like, the sooner we can decide, the sooner we can play. Or I'll say something like, if you guys aren't able to agree, then maybe I'll just be blue. I do that sometimes, and they're like, no. So I actually went to go talk to the kiddo who was leaving early, and I came back to the group, and 2 of the kids had chosen a different color while I was gone. And these are 2 kids who are new this year, and they've both been there every day. There's some of the kids that I've talked about that have had rough days. And so the fact that both of them on their own had chosen to be not blue was really impressive to me. I was very impressed by that. And I think for a lot of people, this doesn't seem like a big deal. Like, why is that a big deal? It's actually a huge deal. I think a kiddo who's always stuck on going first, or who's always stuck on being a certain color, the day that they can be unstuck about that, I think is a huge deal. And so this was a really amazing day for me, for these 2 guys who both were willing to be a different color. It's just a bigger deal than we give it credit for usually. One other thing that happened that was kind of interesting is at the end of the day, I was building geomagnetic tiles with one of the kids. I think everybody else was doing marbles and we were doing tiles. And at one point, he just randomly, I think I had kind of stopped building and I was just hanging out, and he knocked what I had built over. Sometimes I have over dramatic reactions to things to prove a point. And so that's what I did. I had an overly dramatic reaction to that. And I said, that was mine. That was mine. And so he's like, oh, and he like kind of, put it back together. But at the end of the day, when we were cleaning up and getting ready to go, someone knocked his over. And what I noticed is that he didn't have a reaction to that, which previously he definitely would have. So I thought that was really interesting that I'm thinking, hoping that he made the connection from him knocking mine over and how I didn't appreciate that. And then someone did it to him. So it's just these little things that you might not always even know. We tend to notice the things that don't go well. That's how our brains are wired. We tend to notice the things that don't go well. I try to notice the things that didn't go well last time and went well this time. That's what's important to me. That's the growth, is what was a struggle last week or yesterday, and today it's not. Another thing with that, on Tuesday, the kiddo who had a really hard day on Monday, who's the same kiddo who previously physically would not let somebody bump him out, and sorry, he was physically keeping that kid from taking his piece. On Tuesday in aggravation, he said, I don't really care if I want to win. I actually kind of want to lose. And I think that was a coping mechanism for him. I think he was like mentally preparing himself for not winning, but he played just like he didn't care. In aggravation, you're intended to knock people out. It's similar to sorry from a mentality strategy perspective. He got knocked out twice, which was more than anybody else, and he had zero reaction to it. Zero. And that game can take a while, especially with all 6 people playing. So we didn't get to finish it before we went on to marbles and tiles. But a week ago, this is the kid who physically wouldn't let somebody knock him out of sorry. And today he truly had no reaction to getting knocked out twice in a game that he had never even played before, the same day that he agreed to not be blue. So just significant growth in little things that we might not pay attention to, but I do. These are the things that I pay attention to. On Wednesday, at the playground, one of the kids who was there on Monday pointed out to me how nobody was complaining on Wednesday and asked me if I would point out the kids who weren't complaining like I did on Monday. So when we got back to Starfish, we talked about it all over again. We talked about how she had noticed nobody was complaining. And we talked about how we had a fun day at the park on Wednesday. And part of it is because nobody was complaining. So I thought that was really cute that she noticed, Steph, look, nobody's complaining today. She also, I am very much about the kids being independent. It's a really big deal for me. For the kids who are older than 10, they are welcome and encouraged to come into the building on their own from the parking lot. I even have a little one who's doing that, just coming in on their own from the parking lot. The bathroom is on the other side of the building for the boys, and they are welcome to go by themselves. I trust all of them. I really, actually, the reason we even know that there's a playground at this park we go to is because a couple years ago, we used to just go to the park and I would take sports equipment and they could do whatever. And one of the older students asked me if they could go for a walk. And I said, yes. I said, you guys can go wherever. I said, just pay attention to how you're getting there so you know how to get back. And I gave him a time. I said, make sure you're back by this time. And then, yeah, you're more than welcome to go. So he went, and probably 3 or 4 other kids went with him. And I wasn't worried about them at all. And they came back having discovered the playground. That's the reason we go to the playground now. I didn't even realize it was there before, but because I just let them go adventure and explore, they discovered the playground. And then that became a thing. Like every day they would ask if they could go for a walk. And I just, there's certain kids who are always natural leaders, especially some of the older ones. And so I just say, anybody who's going, you just got to stay with so-and-so. So at the playground on Wednesday, there was some kids there. I don't know if it was like a birthday party or a camp or something. There was a group of like maybe 8 girls there. And one of them was climbing in a tree. And so one of my campers asked if she could go climb a tree. And I said, absolutely. I said, the only expectation is you have to be able to get yourself down. So you can climb wherever you want to. You just have to be able to get down. And so she went off and was climbing. One of the other kids he didn't want to climb, but he was really interested in watching her climb. So she was going up in the tree. I always give the kids notices as to how many minutes we have left before we're leaving. And so I was, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute. And so then I told her, I said, okay, we're leaving in 1 minute. So time to figure out how you're going to get down. And I could tell she got a bit anxious. She was probably 6 feet off the ground by then. And the tree went up and then it kind of flattened out for a bit. And so she was on the flat part. So I said, well, you got a choice to make. I said, you can kind of shimmy your way back down the way you climbed up, or you can drop down out of the tree. It's up to you. And so she kind of did a little bit of both. She shimmied down until it got like a bit too steep for her to keep shimmying down. And then she decided to drop down. So by then she was, I don't know, maybe 4 feet off the ground. What I didn't recognize was happening until later is so I had a student that came on this day. This was his first time this summer, but he was with me for a while previously. This was just his first day this summer. He walked over to her and I noticed him going over to her, but I didn't really know, what he was thinking about. And as she dropped from the tree, he put his arms out to catch her. She's younger and he's older. So he put his arms out to catch her. which I thought was really interesting. She didn't know that that's what he was doing. And so they didn't connect. It was actually really awkward because nobody knew that that's what he was trying to do. But it was really thoughtful. It really surprised me that he was thinking about that and that he put the effort into actually trying to go and catch her as she jumped out of the tree. I thought that was really cool. Another thing that happened at the playground, I talked before about trying to reinforce the concept of kids talking to people about things that they're both interested in instead of talking to people about things they don't care about. So I talked about that, I know, in week 2, maybe even in week 1. One of my students, this kiddo has been with me for a while, for several years. And so, as he gets older, we are always kind of working on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Part of the thing with social is there's always a next thing. I think sometimes people wonder why kids stay at Starfish Social Club for so long. And to me, it's like going to the gym. There's always a next thing. There's always another level. There's always something else you can accomplish. And because my students are always getting older, they're aging into new environments. So they're aging into middle school. They're aging into high school. They're aging into college or vocational. So they're always aging into a new environment where social is different. So this student, he's now college age. He started talking to me on the playground about James Bond. And I just pointed out, I said, yeah, I'm not interested in James Bond at all. But I said, who do you know who is? And then he could think of another student just based on the side conversations they have at camp. He kind of kept coming back to me and kept trying to talk about James Bond. And so I just kept repeating that, I don't care about James Bond at all. And so then I said, who do you know who does want to talk about James Bond? Or what do you know that I would be interested in talking about that we have in common? Okay, so I think it's, you can go either way with that. You can try to get them to think about somebody who would be interested in that topic if you think it's truly about the topic. But if you think they're just trying to converse and make a connection, have them think about what you two have in common. That's something that we do. That's in the October through December part of the program, is we make Venn diagrams with everybody in the group so that you can see, what do you guys have in common? Where's the overlap? Because that's your topics of conversation, is what's in the Venn diagram. We had more discussions on Wednesday about stopping when people ask us to stop, because that came up again on Wednesday. Different kiddos this time. Also, I think sometimes I think all kids sometimes don't think they're allowed to give other kids feedback, especially kids who may be a little bit different, especially kids who get upset when they're given feedback. I think kids feel uncomfortable giving feedback in situations sometimes. It's important to me that all of my students learn that they can give feedback to anybody. We just do it politely and respectfully. We don't do the stop it, right? We don't do that. But we can always give somebody polite, respectful feedback. And at Starfish, what we talk about is we give feedback for one of 3 reasons. We don't give people feedback just because we don't like them. We don't give people feedback because we think they're annoying. We give them feedback, number 1, if they're in danger of hurting themselves. Like if somebody's about to do something and you can see that they're going to get hurt. Number 2, if they're in danger of hurting someone else, they're about to crash into somebody, something's going to happen and they're going to hurt somebody else, or they're, backing up and they're going to knock over somebody's game, whatever. And number 3 is when they're in danger of hurting their reputation. So when somebody's doing something and you can tell that it's bothering other people, it's annoying other people, it's making other people not want to be around them, we can give them polite, respectful feedback. So we had a big conversation about that on Wednesday, because I just always can see that some kids think they can't give other kids feedback. And at Starfish Social Club, that's definitely not true. Their feedback to each other is more valuable than my feedback because I'm not their peer. And so their feedback to each other is extremely valuable. So we talked about that. One of the kiddo that was kind of bothering the other kids, I had him come sit by me while we were doing our activity. And after a while, he asked if he could go back to where he was sitting. And I had him ask the kids that he'd been bothering. Because I said, if you're going to go back, you're going to sit by them again. And it's really up to them if they're okay with that. I always like, especially in a situation like that where the kids had been giving him feedback and he wasn't listening, and I ended up having to have him come sit by me. I want them to feel validated and honored and respected. So I left it up to them, and they said yes. They said that he could come back and sit by them. But I like them to know that it's okay for them to give feedback and that their opinions are valuable. Let's see. For game time on Wednesday, the kids on Wednesday had just been chatting a lot and had been learning about things that they have in common with each other. It was actually fueled by the kiddo with social anxiety who asked people a bunch of questions because he was asking people questions. And so then one thing that I noticed this years ago, is that the kids don't always, even if they recognize that they have something in common with somebody, they don't always say anything about it. So they don't always use that to fuel further conversation. Really, the reason we talk to other people is to try to find things we have in common. That's really the basis of conversations, is we're looking for things. It's like fishing. We're fishing for things we have in common, because once you find what you have in common with somebody, you always have something that you can talk about with them. So that's really what conversations are about. Social conversations anyways. Informational conversations are about getting information, but social conversations are fishing for what we have in common with people. But I noticed that so many of my students, even once they hear that somebody has something in common with them, they don't do anything with that information. And so what I did for game time on Wednesday, because they'd been having so many conversations about what they like, I said, find a group that you have something in common with. So for everybody that's in the group, think of one thing you have in common with them. And for some of the kids, this was not so difficult because they take in information and pay attention to it. But what I noticed is some of the kids will ask the questions and not pay attention to the answers. So they'll ask something like, what's your favorite sport? So this is a real example. One kid asked, what's your favorite sport? And one kid answered with the sport that I know is also this kid's favorite sport. But that conversation didn't go anywhere, right? Because the kid who asked the question is just in interview mode. He's just in question generation mode. That's not a conversation. That's an interview. So a conversation is where we take somebody's answer and we build on their answer instead of asking them a completely different question next time. So it really helped me to recognize who are the kids that listen to what other kids say and who are the kids that are just stuck in question mode. So for some of the kids, it was a lot of prompting. When I said, find somebody who you have something in common with, it was a lot of prompting. I remember, what so-and-so said earlier, when you asked him what his favorite movie is, what did he say? Right. And then it's just a lot of prompting like that to help kids recognize, number one, that you do have something in common with this other person. And number two, if you can remember what it is, that's always something you guys can talk about. At the very end of the day, one of the kids had a difficult time putting things away and transitioning. This is the kiddo who week 1, we had the situation with the marbles where it took about 30 minutes for him to pick everything up and be able to go home. 30 minutes. On Wednesday, it took about 10. So again, I think some people see the 10 minutes and it's easy to get frustrated that that took 10 minutes. I see that that was a third of the time that it took 2 weeks ago. A third of the time. That's significant. Thursday, one of the things when it comes to giving feedback that I also teach the kids is if there's somebody that you don't like or that you don't get along with, it's best for you to not give them feedback because it's not going to be received well. That it often sounds like we're picking on them. And so usually if it's somebody that you don't like or that you don't get along with, let other people give them feedback. What I noticed on Thursday is that one kiddo was kind of targeting another kiddo and just kept kind of picking at him, kept giving him feedback about things that nobody else cared about. And that's another thing. If you're the only person bothered by this thing, it's probably a you thing. It's probably not even about this other kid. My example of that, I cannot handle whistling. Cannot handle the pitch of whistling makes my brain want to explode. I cannot handle people whistling. But it's such a joy. It's like the most joyful sound in the world to everybody else. So I am not about to give people feedback and ask them to stop whistling because nobody else cares. Nobody else is bothered by that. The only exception might be if they're doing it at an inappropriate time, right? If you're in a reading class and somebody's whistling. But I will not give feedback to people whistling because I recognize that's a me thing. That has nothing to do with them. So sometimes we get kids who either become the rule police and they want to give everybody feedback about things that they don't like, or they will find one particular kid that they don't always get along with, and they will kind of harp on that kid. And so that's what was happening on Thursday. It's kind of all of a sudden, one of the kids really kind of started picking on one of the other kids and finding all these things to like get on to him about and give him feedback about, even things like they were on the merry-go-round together and the other kid was pushing the merry-go-round, but the first kid just wanted to lay on it and have it not move. And so he was yelling, stop it, stop pushing the merry, stop it. And I had to intervene and say, this is a merry-go-round. It is for going in circles. So if you don't want it to go in circles, you need to get off because he's not doing anything wrong. He's doing exactly what you do on a merry-go-round. So just things like that I finally had to, kind of call him out on, that he was being rude to this other kid, really just because it was things that he was annoyed by. And even about halfway through the day, one of the things that I noticed, this is pretty common, especially with kids who want a reputation for being funny, is that when they see or hear someone else doing something that causes people to laugh, they will mimic it. So it's pretty common. So kiddo who was getting upset at the other one was just being silly. And so the other kiddo started mimicking him because he saw that people were laughing. And the first kiddo, same as he had been most of the day, got really annoyed with him to stop copying me. But then minutes later, the kid who was upset started copying someone else for the same reason, right? Because he thought it was funny and he saw people were laughing. So I just pointed that out to him. I said, you got upset that so-and-so was mimicking you, but now you're mimicking this guy. And so just helping him make that connection. I think that's not uncommon that the kids will give somebody feedback and then turn around and do the same thing that they just gave somebody feedback about. There's, definitely a lot of times where we want different people to have different rules. Let me see. Oh, another little thing about something that came up that I think there's just so many little bitty things. As a parent or a teacher, here's something I would love for you to help me reinforce. when we're in a group, this happens a lot at lunch. Kids can come early and have lunch together. And so it's just a social time. People are just chatting. And sometimes it just gets kind of quiet, when there's a break or a pause. If somebody starts talking, but they're not talking to anybody specifically, I actually don't acknowledge that. So for example, if we're sitting there and somebody says, "Hey, who's your favorite superhero?" I don't actually acknowledge that question. And neither do the kids, because autistic and ADHD brains, typically, we spend less time paying attention to what's happening in our environment because we spend a lot of time in our heads. We typically don't even hear things like that unless somebody calls our name, taps us on the arm, something. In a classroom, you may have seen this with your kiddo, that they don't do a good job of paying attention to what the teacher's asking everybody to do because they aren't listening to what the teacher's asking everybody to do, right? They may be off thinking about something else, and it's not until somebody says their name or calls their attention explicitly that they pay attention. What I want the kids to learn is that if you're talking to somebody, you need to get their attention. That you can't really just talk into the void and hope that someone's going to respond to you. So one of two things. If they're talking to me, again, sometimes I have dramatic reactions to things. I'll ignore it. And then if they keep repeating it, I'll do something like, oh, are you talking to me? And then they'll say yes. And I'll say, do you know how you can get my attention if I'm not paying attention? And I always come back to saying that person's name. So I don't respond to kids who just say things into the void. I want them to learn how to say somebody's name, or even to say something like, "Hey guys," something that shows that you're talking to everybody. But if you just say something like, "What'd you eat for dinner last night?" In a group like mine, you're most likely going to get crickets because nobody thinks you're talking to them. Whereas in a neurotypical group, you might get an answer from everybody. In my group, nobody thinks you're talking to them. And so you're not going to get a response. So I really try to teach and reinforce with the kids, say the name of the person that you're talking to get their attention. So those of you guys that are parents, educators, therapists, it's a really easy thing to reinforce in your environment as well. Teach your kiddos to say somebody's name and don't respond to things that they say into the void. Teach them how to say somebody's name. Okay, typically when we're having social conversations, we're talking either to everybody or to a specific person, but we're typically not just saying something into the void. So just a little thing there. One more thing when it comes to giving feedback, because this came up several times this week, giving people feedback, is just the concept, helping the kids understand that we are all annoying to somebody at some point. Everybody in the world is annoying to somebody. And so just recognizing that we don't do things on purpose to be annoying. We're not intentionally trying to be annoying, but sometimes it happens. And that's why we give people feedback. And that's why we listen to people's feedback, because nobody in the world wants to be annoying. Nobody wants that kind of reputation. I'd say the only exception is siblings sometimes. Sometimes we are annoying on purpose. But in the general social world, nobody wants a reputation for being annoying. And so recognizing that we're all annoying to somebody at some time, and we can give people feedback so they don't get a reputation for being annoying. And we can take people's feedback so that we don't get a reputation for being annoying. So that's my summary of week 3. Just really, really proud. Oh, on Thursday, I don't think I had this in my notes. The same kiddo who had the incident with the marbles during week 1 that took 30 minutes. And then the incident earlier in the week, I think on Wednesday, that was 10 minutes. We had another situation on Thursday that was a little more serious than Wednesday, but recovery was quick. It was quick recovery. And so we're always going to be upset. There's always going to be something that upsets us or hurts our feelings. You know, it's okay. But again, my goal is for kids to always recognize we can always try again and we can always make it better. And by the end, this had happened toward the end of the day, but by the end of the day, we're over it. We're doing marbles and tiles. We have moved on. We're over it. The same for the kiddo who during week 2 tore his picture, missed all of game time, missed all of marbles and tiles. On Monday was part of everything. And on Thursday, which was day 3 for him, absolute complete difference between his day 1 and his day 3. So day 1 to day 2, significant difference. And day 2 to day 3, significant difference. So between day 1 and day 3, an overwhelming difference in this kid in 3 days of coming. Just amazing. So thank you to all the parents who provide me with your children and let me hang out with them all day. Thank you for trusting in the process. It is definitely difficult sometimes. It is definitely challenging. But thank you for believing in your kiddo enough to support them in this. Thank you for letting them hang out with me and for continuing to send them even when things get difficult. Because I know that's the hardest time is day 2. It's like, again, it's like going to the gym. You can go to the gym one day, but then the next day you're sore and you're tired. Day 2 is the hardest day to go to the gym, not day 1. So thank you for everybody who has continued to send your kiddos. 3 weeks of camp, which is just amazing that we've already had that much. And I am looking forward to week 4. So thank you for being here. I'm really glad that you're here, and I'll see you again next week.